Okay, so here are a couple more problems from out of section 1.3. We'll look at 40 and 42 in this video, and these are both in the same set of problems from out of section 1.3, both related. It wants us to evaluate a one-sided limit in number 40. Normally what we would say is let's just take the value that x is approaching, 4, put it in place of that x, see if you get lucky. Here, 4 goes there, you square it, you get 16. 16 minus 16 is 0. Square root of 0 is 0. You have to be a little more careful whenever you have a function such as this one, though, because if I end up having this number underneath the root be on the wrong side of 0, if it ends up negative, I can't take the square root of it and still get a real value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to consider putting a number slightly smaller than 4 in place of this x. And if I do that, I'm going to have square root of 16 minus a number slightly smaller than 4 that I'm squaring. Now if you square a number slightly smaller than 4, like 3.99, you end up with an answer that's going to be slightly smaller than 16. Okay, so I'm just kind of using the notation with the one-sided limits here as I'm doing my computations. This number is slightly smaller than 16, 15.99, something like that. If I do 16 minus this 15.99, I end up with a positive value under the root. That's good. As I let this number that I'm putting in place of the x get closer and closer and closer to 4, this difference is going to get closer and closer and closer to 0, and this result definitely is 0. If you check out number 39, which is just before this one, you're going to have kind of the opposite phenomena occur. So just be careful with that one. I'll also look at 42 in the same video, similar sort of problem. If you can put, and I think I copied this wrong, I'm approaching -2 from the bigger side. That's my fault. That's supposed to be a -2 right there. But if I put a -2 in place of this x and square it, I get a +4. If I put a -2 in place of this x and multiply it by 3, I'd have -6 and then +2. So I'd have 4 plus 6, or -6, excuse me, plus 2. That would be 0. Square root of 0 is 0. But which side of 0 are we on underneath this root? Are we on the positive side, the side that's okay, like we were in number 40, or are we on the bad side, the negative side? So I'm going to take a minute to think about this a little bit more, and I said it a couple times in class today, factoring is definitely going to be your best friend when you're using limits. And I'm looking at a polynomial underneath that square root that I think can factor. So if you try to factor this, I think we can go with x plus 2 and x plus 1 as the two binomials that, when you FOIL them together, take you back to the trinomial that we had here. So I have that factored, and the only reason why I wanted to get it factored is because I wanted to be able to think a little bit more about the two components of the product underneath this root. Because I know if this one's positive and that one's positive, when I multiply these two factors together, I get a positive value in the end. That's okay. But what happens if this factor's negative and that factor's positive? That's going to be an issue, because then you're going to have a negative underneath that root. So I'm going to attempt to put a number slightly bigger than -2 in place of the x's at this point. And just kind of think about what happens. So I'm going to have a number slightly bigger than -2 go here. I'm going to add 2 to it, and I'm going to have a number slightly bigger than -2 go here, and I'm going to add 1 to it. Now, if you look at this piece, I'm going to deal with this piece secondly. I'm going to look at the last factor first here. If I have -2, slightly bigger than -2, so like -1.9, and I add 1, I end up with a value of practically -1 right there. It's going to be slightly bigger than -1, okay, because we had a number slightly bigger than -2 there. But I don't really care about that. -1's okay. The thing I care about is the thing that becomes a 0 right here. I want to figure out which side of 0 we're on with this first factor. So -1.9, slightly bigger than -2, plus 2 takes us to the positive side of 0, right? -1.99 plus 2, positive side of 0. This is where the issue is. This is a positive value, times a negative value, your answer underneath this root, when you take this product, it's very close to 0, but it's a positive times a negative, so your answer is going to be negative. How do you take the square root of a negative? Well, you can't. A number slightly bigger than -2 is not in the domain of this function. Therefore, what we'd have to say here is that this limit does not exist. I posted a video last Thursday on Moodle that can help with this sort of problem, so you can check that, and I will take a look at an instantaneous velocity in problem number 50 to wrap things up in the next video.